The Adidas Boston 13 versus the Nike Zoomfly 6. Both the brand's tempo trainers. How do you choose which one is right for you? Before I jump into the comparison of the Adidas Boston 13 and the Nike Zoomfly 6, I need to set the stage a little bit with a bit of their background, because it's important to understand where they've been to understand kind of where they are right now and why my opinions of the two shoes differ so much. Now, both the Boston and the Zoomfly have for many years now been the de facto tempo trainers for each brand. The Boston predates the Adios Pro by quite a bit on the Adidas side. In fact, if you're interested in the Boston history, I have a whole video on that, link in the description for that. But starting with the Boston 10, which was a big change from the Boston 9, which was one of the greatest running shoes ever made. The Boston 10, not so much. The Boston 10 really was the tempo trainer that launched a little bit after the original Adios Pro. And with the Zoomfly goes way back to 2017. It actually launched side by side with the original Vaporfly 4%. However, I think what's really relevant is what you can see here, the Zoomfly 3, 4, and 5, because that's where Nike sort of got into the same troubles that Adidas got into with the Boston 10 and 11. But in Nike's case, they actually complicated it because, as you can see, they actually did launch two super shoes. They had both the Vaporfly and the Alphafly. And with their tempo trainer, they did really try to make a shoe that would work for both of them. Now, Nike did have other tempo trainers, namely the Tempo Next Percent, but the Zoomfly was always meant to be the sort of main tempo trainer in the line. That's where it started, and that's what Nike always tried to do. And in fact, the Zoomfly 5 was Nike's redesign, trying to make that shoe work for both the Alphafly 2 at the time and the Vaporfly. Didn't really work for either. That was a whole other story, which I'll talk about someday. As far as Adidas goes, the design language and the style of the Boston from the 10 onwards really did mimic what they were doing at the Adios Pro, but from a feel standpoint, they just never did. And that brings us to, again, these really four shoes: the Adidas Boston 10 and 11 and the Nike Zoomfly 3 and 4. These four shoes are actually quite similar. They were very stiff, very bottom heavy, and very harsh to run in. And they didn't really offer much as far as feel for the brand's super shoes at the time, mainly the Adios Pro on the Adidas side, and the Vaporfly, and then eventually the Alphafly on the Nike side. They just didn't do it. Now, with further generations, the Zoomfly 5 from Nike, and then moving into the Boston 12, things got a little bit better, but that kind of brings us up to speed as to where we are right now in 2025 with the Nike Zoomfly 6 and the Adidas Boston 13. As always with my versus videos, let's start with the specs. Now on paper, these two shoes actually are quite similar. The Nike Zoomfly 6 has a little bit more stack height, a little bit more foam in it than the Boston 13, but otherwise they're pretty similar. Their weights are similar. However, the balance of the two shoes differs pretty greatly. The Boston 13 is still maintaining that very bottom heavy feel. All of the weight of that shoe feels like it's under your foot and swinging with each stride, whereas the Zoomfly 6 is a much more balanced shoe. It's the same weight, it just doesn't feel like the weight's in any one point. It's definitely not bottom heavy. From a stack height standpoint, as I said, the Zoomfly 6 has a little bit more foam, but the drop is the same in both these shoes in the sense that it's a real feel for the drop. 6 mil in the Boston 13, 8 mil in the Zoomfly 6. Though that real feel comes from the overall firmness and stiffness of the Boston 13. There's no sink in that shoe at all, so you're getting that true 6 mil drop. And in the Zoomfly 6, that is a softer shoe. However, there is a carbon fiber fly plate in that shoe, so it does give you that real 8 mil drop feel. And that's important between these two shoes. From a construction standpoint, they both share the brand's Premier Super Foam directly under the foot with a stiffening agent, and then a secondary sort of generic foam below that, Light Strike in the Adidas Boston 13 and SRO2 foam in the Zoomfly 6 from Nike. However, Besides that construction, the ride feel of these two shoes differs quite a bit. I'll get to that in the ride section of this video, but you can kind of see that in the ride profile graphic that I'm showing. The Boston 13 is very stiff, very firm, very brick-like, where the Zoomfly 6 is actually fairly lively. It's not as dynamic as a Vaporfly or Alphafly, but for a tempo trainer, you just wouldn't expect that. And moving to the contact patch and outsoles of these two shoes, I think these are actually two great outsoles from both brands. From a width standpoint, the Zoomfly 6 is a little bit narrower, but honestly, both these shoes feel quite the same on foot. The midfoot of the Zoomfly 6 is a little bit more structured, even with that big cutout, but from a rail standpoint, you're getting a lot more support there, whereas I know that medial midfoot cutout for a lot of the Adizero range is a big thing for people with low arches or flat feet. I will say that the Zoomfly 6 gives you a little bit more structure in that area while still saving weight, so it's a better design. But from an outsole standpoint, I think both of these are great. Both of them work quite well. And specifically to the outsole, I think the combination of Adidas's light traction CPU outsole, which is the clear section on the lateral forefoot and medial heel, and then the gray and black sections of the outsole, which are just traditional Continental rubber, gives you an optimal training outsole on the Boston 13. Gives you the durability where you need it of the CPU outsole and gives you the grip where you need it of the Continental outsole. Whereas on the Zoomfly 6, I think this is just a very good training outsole from Nike. It definitely has a lot in common with both the Alphafly and the Vaporfly, but it is a more durable rubber. Though it isn't the most durable, I would say the Boston 13 is going to be the more durable outsole between these two shoes, but both have great grip, and I think both, again, are really well done. And starting with the uppers of these two shoes, they could not be further apart as far as the design and engineering of them, but I think they both do a great job. Starting with the Boston 13, this is a single piece of engineered mesh which is very airy, very open, very compliant to the foot, and fits very well, but Adidas has gone and they've added some padding to the ankle collar and Achilles flare, solving a lot of the issues in the Boston 13 that the Boston 12 had. Mainly the harshness around the Achilles and just how much more performance-oriented or race-oriented that upper was. The changes to the upper on the Boston 13 make this somewhere between a training upper and a performance upper. It definitely has a performance fit, and I think it's an excellent upper. You have a padded, gusseted tongue, which sits on top of the foot, and overall works really well. You do have the standard, very narrow Adizero laces, but that's on every Adizero shoe. It's not unique to this shoe. I think overall, coming from the Boston 12, the updates to the upper on the Boston 13 are significantly better and make this shoe a much better shoe, because a lot of the problems people had was with the fit and the feel of the upper of the Boston 12. The Boston 13 completely solves that. Over here though, on the Zoomfly 6, this upper is much more complicated. It's a two-layer upper. There's almost like a neoprene sock that sits close to the foot with a much finer mesh on top of that, which contains the foot. However, it gives you a great lockdown. I will say the Zoomfly 6 upper is a little bit more training focused. It's not quite as performance oriented as I want in this type of shoe, but the lockdown in this shoe is really, really great because you have a wide tongue that sits on the foot. It is well padded, and the lockdown is just very good in this shoe. And the way the two materials of the upper fit the foot, again, you just have really great lockdown in this shoe that's comfortable and really works for a large range of running. I think both of these are excellent uppers, some of the best uppers that both brands have done in many years. Moving to sizing and fit, I went true to size in both these shoes. They're both US men's size 9, which is what I wear in pretty much every shoe, and I love the fit of both of these. As I've said, the fit of the Boston 13 is a little bit more performance oriented. This is more what I expect out of a tempo trainer like this shoe. But again, I get really good lockdown in this shoe and I get a little bit more comfort in this. I think that's why this shoe was so popular, because it's a little bit more training focused. You have a little bit more of the comfort in the Achilles flare in this shoe and around the ankle collar, but you're still getting a really good lockdown. However, from a length standpoint, I'm going to say that the Zoomfly 6 is a little bit longer. This is a more generous, true to size fit, where this is a much tighter, as I would call it, a more performance true to size fit. The bottom line, though, is that I think a lot of people are going to want to go up half a size in the Boston 13, especially to get a similar fit as to what they had in the Boston 12. Or if you've been running in the Adidas Evo SL, you're going to want to go up half a size in this shoe. Or if your foot is on the lower end of your size, you can probably get away with true to size. If it's on the larger end of your size, definitely go up half a size. Whereas in the Zoomfly 6, I think it's true to size in this shoe all the way, and you're going to get a great fit regardless. Moving to the right of these two shoes, I'm actually going to start with this, the Nike Zoomfly 6. Now, this shoe came out last year in 2024, and this was a shoe that caught the attention of a lot of runners because it is so good. It's so fun to run in. And I think it was a big surprise across the board for really everyone in this shoe tube space, but also just run media. I don't think anyone expected a Nike trainer to take off like this did, to the point where this was on a lot of people's best of lists last year in 2024 because it was just so comfortable and so fun to run in. This was a shoe Nike really needed to nail, and they really did nail it. They nailed it not only for their lineup, but they nailed it for the industry and the space. A lot of people who really don't like Nike or don't give Nike a lot of credit or time, especially their trainers, really love this shoe. And again, this shoe was quite popular. And I think a lot of that comes down to some of the changes that Nike made to this shoe in its development. Now, when this shoe was first previewed for buyers about 6 to 12 months before it actually released, which is common in the space, there were a lot of comments that this shoe was too heavy, too stiff, more of the same. It wasn't going to do well. Somewhere between those initial conversations and the launch of this shoe softened up considerably and lost almost a full ounce in weight, making this shoe really the outstanding shoe that went to market that everyone really fell in love with last fall. And that's where Nike really nailed it with this shoe. However, on the other side of this, we now have the Adidas Boston 13. This shoe is a good update or upgrade to the Boston 12, but fundamentally it's the Boston 12. There's really no change here. This is still stiff. It's still rigid. You get a better upper that's going to give more comfort. I think you have a better outer that's going to give better durability. But from a run profile and run dynamics, nothing's really changed in this shoe. And running shoes have changed a lot since 2023. We've seen a big shift from shoes, where in 2023, this shoe, probably alongside the Saucony Endorphin Elite 3, were really the two top super trainers, or what we called super trainers back then. Luckily, we don't really use that word anymore. This is more what I would just call a tempo trainer or a performance trainer. But back 2 years ago, this was sort of the state of the art. This feel, this stiffer, firmer feel, was something more common in the space, especially for Adizero. But now in 2025, we have a lot of non-plated shoes. We have a lot more flexible shoes. We have a lot softer foams. We have shoes that require a lot of lower leg strength, a lot more foot strength for the dynamics in the shoe, especially the Adios Pro 4 from Adidas. That is one of the softer shoes that requires more foot strength and more lower leg strength to actually make work effectively. You can also look at the Adidas Evo 2. That's another shoe that requires that. So as a tempo trainer in the Adizero range, this shoe doesn't aid in any of that. Because it's so stiff, because it's so rigid, you're not training any of the foot mechanics or foot strength that you need to effectively run in the Adios Pro 4. But because this has an older geometry, pretty much the same geometry that the Boston 12 had, you're actually not getting any of the feel of the geometry of this shoe either. So this shoe is both from a foot and leg strength standpoint and from a geometry and just feel of this firmer stack of foam, this older style Lightstrike Pro, what I call Lightstrike Pro Classic, it just doesn't offer any relevance to the Adios Pro 4, and that's the biggest problem. Now, this isn't a horrible shoe. If you're a runner who loved the Boston 12, you're going to love this shoe. And if you're a runner who wants a firmer, stiffer shoe with more stability, you don't like all these softer shoes that we have now in 2025, this is probably going to be your best bet, because this is probably going to be the firmest and stiffest shoe that you're going to see in 2025. But if that's what you're looking for, this shoe's actually outstanding. So it's not that Adidas didn't make a good shoe. I think this is a great shoe, and it's a great update to the Boston 12. They made the wrong shoe that's not really relevant for 2025, both Adizero and the industry as a whole. And specifically, this is what I mean. The Boston 13 to the Adios Pro 4 from Adidas really has zero connection. From a run dynamic, run feel, the way the foams and materials feel, the way the shoe engages to the ground, the way the shoe will leverage your foot strength or build foot strength and lower leg strength, or teach you to engage actually using your whole foot through your stride, which is something the Adidas Pro 4 requires. The Boston 13 gives you none of that. From a design language standpoint, there's only a couple lines, as you can see, between these two shoes that are shared, but otherwise they don't even really look like they're from the same series. Where with the Zoomfly 6, Nike somehow finally, after about 4 or 5 tries, managed to make a tempo trainer that bridged the gap between both of their super shoes. The Zoomfly 6 gives you the bounce of the Alphafly 3 and the roll of the Zoomfly 3 or 4 in this case. And somehow they did that in one shoe, and it works exceptionally well. And how Nike achieved that is actually quite interesting, because when this shoe launched, we saw ZoomX directly below the foot, above the carbon fiber plate, and then we saw Nike's SRO2 foam below that. Now, SRO2 foam is kind of Nike's generic EVA-like foam. It's one you see in a lot of their budget shoes, in their lifestyle shoes. It's not really a performance foam. And I think a lot of questions, including myself, I had a lot of questions as to why is it in this shoe? But after I ran in this shoe a bit, I understood, because SRO2 foam is a very airy foam. It's actually a very lightweight and soft foam. There's not a lot of resilience to SRO2 foam, but it's soft and airy and very absorbent as far as cushion. So that makes this shoe feel less bottom heavy finally, because the Zoomfly has always been kind of bottom heavy, but this is the first Zoomfly that's not, because you get this airy carrier foam with the ZoomX foam above that with the stiffness of the plate. So you're getting the sink and some of the bounce again from the Alphafly, but you're getting the absorbent of a carrier foam that's not overly heavy, not bottom heavy, and is actually quite soft. So those two foams together made this shoe quite fun to run in, quite well loved, and actually it was a tempo trainer that was a carbon plated shoe that ran more like a normal trainer. So people that were new to carbon plated shoes, or they didn't want to go full super shoe, or they didn't want the extremeness of a super shoe, the Zoomfly really ticked a lot of boxes for a lot of runners, which was another reason why this was so popular. Ride dynamics and its versatility. Whereas with the Boston 13, Adidas has gone with a similar construction, Lightstrike Pro Classic, the older Lightstrike Pro Classic, the one that's more springy and denser than the one that's in the Adios Pro 4, which I just call Lightstrike Pro, or the new Lightstrike Pro. With the energy rods, they're not carbon energy rods, they're glass fiber rods. But below that, and that's really the biggest problem in the shoe, is the Lightstrike foam. Lightstrike is Adidas's just generic foam. In the Boston 12, the Lightstrike was called Lightstrike 2.0. In this shoe, it's just called Lightstrike. I think Adidas just dropped the 2.0 in 2024, and it's really the same foam. But the problem with Lightstrike is it's very dense, very dead, not soft at all, and it's actually quite heavy. So that makes the balance of this shoe bottom heavy. It gives any kind of resilience that the Lightstrike Pro in this shoe was actually going to give you, and some of the engineering that they did around the sidewalls of the shoe, which I talk about in my review of the shoe. I'll put a link in the description if you want the full story on the Boston 13. But any sort of resilience you're going to get from Lightstrike Pro is completely deadened out by this stiff, firm, and dead Lightstrike foam. So that makes this shoe just run kind of like a brick. Now, some people like that, and again, if that's what you want, this is a great option for that. But that is completely different for where the industry is as a whole right now in 2025, and where Adidas seems to be going with the Adizero range, mainly from the Adios Pro 4 and the new Evo 2, which is softer, bouncier, more resilient, everything this shoe doesn't have. Another way to look at this is with my performance matrix. So if we put the Adidas Boston 13 and the Nike Zoomfly 6 on here, this is what we get. Now, the Boston 13 is a very good and capable tempo trainer if you just look at it as a single shoe. Or if you want to pair it with, say, the Adios Pro 3, the last generation of Adios Pro. It works exceptionally well. It does that steady into threshold running really well. It's happiest in steady, which is the orange to red area in this range. And that's exactly what I would expect from a tempo trainer. As far as its ability to do easy running, I just think it's too stiff, too firm. I think the geometry isn't right. It's just not there. Though if you are a heavier runner or you're a runner who prefers that firmer, stiffer ride, you're going to do fine with easy running. And for max effort, I think because of the geometry, because it's not quite as aggressive as the Evo SL or the Evo 1 or even the Adios Pro 4, I just don't think it's that great for some of the max effort running. Whereas with the Zoom Fly 6, I think this is a great tempo trainer. It does steady into threshold really well, but it's happier going faster. I think it does really well with threshold into max effort. Though for full all-out reps or like track work or true speed work, it wouldn't be my first choice. But for some of that work that you would be needing for, say, marathon prep, and you're doing faster running half marathon 10K pace, that's what I would call max effort in that context, the Zoom Fly 6 is a great option. Personally, for me, I don't think it's great for easy running. I think it's a little bit too stiff. It's a little bit just too kind of high off the ground for me as well. I think Nike has much better easy run options, but I know a lot of people did like it for that. I just don't personally like that. I found the Zoom Fly 6 really came alive, steady, onward. So what's the verdict here? Well, it should be pretty obvious. The Nike Zoom Fly 6, I think, is my verdict. Though this type of shoe, meaning a tempo trainer, a plated tempo trainer, is not the type of shoe that I run in very often. But if I'm going to, I'm only really going to look at these two options anymore. And as of right now, the Zoom Fly 6 is the much better option. This is more engaging, more dynamic, more fun, more versatile, and just a better shoe to run in. I think more runners are going to be happier with this shoe. But as I've said a few times now, I don't think the Boston 13 is a bad shoe. I just think it's the wrong shoe for right now. Again, if you're a runner who wants a firmer, stiffer ride with more stability, this is going to be your shoe. If you want a softer, bouncy ride with still enough stability, maybe not as stable as the Boston 13, you're going to do really well in the Nike Zoom Fly 6. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, go check out sagasurunning.com for merch, or click the join button to join this channel and support what I do on a monthly basis. Neither one of those options are good for you. Leave a comment, leave a like. That helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.